In my last video, I had the opportunity to have a look at the brand new The Scotsman train set in TT 120 scale from Hornby. Sadly, I was missing something vitally important, which meant I couldn't get it running, but now that part has been received. So without any further ado, join me as I take a look at getting this train set up, running, and see what it's like. I'm Matt, this is Model Minutes, and this is my running review of the Hornby TT 120 scale Scotsman train set. So, to conduct this test, I've decided to borrow a table. After all, this is a tabletop train set, so where better to give it a test. If you want to take a closer look at what was inside the box, take a look at my earlier unboxing video, but we'll do a quick reminder. And it's also great to see that Hornby did indeed send out the missing power track, so I can conduct this review now. So inside the box I've got 12 of these third radius curves, which is enough to make a circle, a left hand point and a sixth radius curve to go with it, the all important power track which I was originally missing and had to get sent out, 6 straight tracks, and when that is all assembled it should look something like this. The Code 80 track is relatively easy to put together, and if you've got any experience with model trains, it's a fairly straightforward process. The point works better sticking out rather than in, as it doesn't fit otherwise inside the circle. You get one buffer stop which goes at the end of your siding, and then you can plug in your power track to the controller. The controller does have a high and a low setting, and I use the low setting throughout this test, and then the mains transformer can be plugged in and you're almost ready to go. The included rerailer can be used to put on the track your 3 Pullman coaches and the 1 LNER A1462 locomotive Blink Bonny. The rerailer I found to be quite handy as it helps you get everything in place. And with that, my layout was ready to go, and it hadn't taken me too long to put everything together. And something else that doesn't take too long is today's sponsor, Blinkist. Blinkist is an app which takes over 5,500 non-fiction books and podcasts and delivers the most important ideas and messages in around 15 minutes or so, in a format they call blinks. The blinks I've found particularly helpful recently are those focused on self-improvement and mental well-being, and being so accessible either in audio or written format means that I can fit them in around my busy schedule. I found myself listening to the audio blinks whilst working on a project on the workbench or driving in my car. I recently listened to the Everyday Hero Manifesto by Robin Sharma, which has helped put parts of my life into perspective through positive outlook and shifting from generating excuses for not doing things and instead focusing on my results rather than failings to try and make 2023 a more positive year for myself. But that's not all. With the new Blinkist Connect feature, every premium plan can be shared by 2 different accounts at no extra cost. You'll both get access to a full premium Blinkist account and can recommend and share your favourite titles with each other. If you use my link in the description, you'll also get 25% off your premium membership when you sign up. So, get 25% off Blinkist Premium and enjoy 2 memberships for the price of 1. Start your 7-day free trial by clicking the link in the description. Thanks to Blinkist for sponsoring this video. Now back to the review. Back on the tabletop, it's time to get this train running, and as you can see it connects to the coaches relatively well. At the moment this hasn't been run in at all, and a period of running in should be done, so about half an hour in each direction, but I'm just doing it straight out of the box, and as you can see the results are relatively smooth and controllable despite the fact it's not had that opportunity to run in yet. I found the couplings to be quite effective as well. Getting them to uncouple was a little bit of a faff. So here it is down on the track, and I'm trying out the very slow speed running in this very early stage, and you can see there is a little bit of cogging, but it does pull away relatively smoothly. That is quite good slow speed control. I think it's worth noting that the majority of the wheels on this are power collecting, but the rear pony truck is unflanged and it's fixed as well. So I think that causes a few of the problems that we might have a little bit later. So trying it in reverse now, and you can see that it's just as good as it was going forwards with no major issues here. the slow speed control is relatively good, but I did notice a little bit of resistance in a few places and it would jerk forwards and backwards as such. Going over the points, so the points are insulated and you can see that at relatively slow speeds it does an alright job of it. I guess having all of those pickups really helps. I then changed the points and decided to run them into the siding just to see how it would cope going over the curve, and I think you'll agree that it manages to do that relatively well. At this moment I'm not really noticing anything too bad with the locomotive, but in this larger shot you might be able to notice that at a consistent power level on the controller, it does slow down a little bit as it meets the curve. And I think that's partly due to that fixed pony truck at the back of the locomotive, which I mentioned earlier, causing a bit of resistance and preventing it from fully following the track. The controller is not my favourite, it's a little bit cheap feeling, and in order to change direction you have to go fully down to 0 and knock the little slider across. But for a relatively cheap controller it does seem to offer relatively good control. As mentioned earlier on, all of the running in this test video has been done on the low setting on the controller, as I felt like this was a fast enough speed. It's at this point, and we start running around the curves, I noticed something strange happening with that front bogie. And you'll notice, I hope, in the clips, that as it hits the curve, it sort of lifts up and does a wheelie and then pings back into place. That front pony bogie truck is sprung and it sort of snaps back into place after it meets the curve. So as you watch these clips here, you can see that it lifts it up off the track and then snaps back into place. And I wasn't entirely sure why it was doing this, and it was a bit difficult to get it to do it on film. But slowing down the locomotive, you can see here that the wheels on the left side of the locomotive have lifted off and then it pings back into place, which is a little bit concerning. I still hadn't quite figured out why it was doing this, but it then dawned on me that it wasn't necessarily a problem with the locomotive. There was a problem with the track. The way the track's been manufactured results in an adverse camber where it lifts off on the inside rail and causes the locomotive to twist as it goes round the curve. I imagine that by gluing it down or pinning it down to the table you could avoid this, but if it's just resting on the top like mine, it was a bit of a problem. That being said, however, in the opposite direction, so now it's going clockwise rather than anti-clockwise, I didn't seem to have the same problem, so I'm not entirely sure what was going on there. Now, this locomotive is billed as being able to run on second radius curves as a minimum. So I actually went out and bought some second radius curves. They come in boxes of 10, which is a little bit backwards because you actually need 12 to make a whole circle. So I had to buy 2 extra bits as well. But again, I set that up on the inside of the third radius train set curves to see what this locomotive and the coaches would be like running on it. And as you can see, it does work on second radius curves. I did notice that the front pony wheels, they sort of lock up a little bit and don't want to turn as freely, and that back unflanged truck as well, it kicks out and it is quite noticeable that it's not on the track. So, you know, I'm not a massive fan of this. I've had N-gauge locomotives which have a pivoting truck at the back which keeps it on the track, and personally I feel like that is a better option. I know that Hornby have gone for a more realistic look, but when it takes a tighter curve like the second radius one, it does become incredibly noticeable that it's no longer on the track. And then when it swings back around to rest on the track, you might be able to notice that it sort of lifts up a little bit, and I worry that it could cause a derailment, but fortunately I've not experienced any derailments during the tests of this locomotive. On the second radius curves, I did notice that it wanted to slow down more, particularly at the slower speeds when it hits the curve, but at high speeds you can see that it doesn't really affect it at all. But on the whole, yeah, it looks like it can take a second radius curve without any real difficulties. And the coaches seem to handle them perfectly fine as well, without any buffer locking or anything like that. So the next thing I thought that would be fun to do would be to try out first radius curves. And obviously the locomotive is not rated to do first radius curves, but I thought it would be interesting to see if it could. And again, there's 10 in a box, so you need to buy 2 extra if you want to have a circle. And let's give it a go. And you can see that, yeah, it will kind of run on first radius curves, but it doesn't like it as much. The back pony truck is swinging right off the track now, and I noticed that the front bogie, it does lift off on the inside. So if you look there, you can see it really lifting up and doing a bit of a wheelie. It doesn't like that at all. I think that spring might be getting in the way. If maybe, you know, I've had some of our N-gauge locomotives where they've just used gravity to hold them onto the track and it's just followed the track. I think that spring might be a bit of a hindrance on these really tight curves and forcing it to kick up in one direction, but it didn't derail or anything, and it actually ran round it moderately okay. If you could live with this small little error or small little issue, then it could be perfectly feasible to do a first radius layout with a large locomotive like this. And as a small point, you can actually get a first radius curve to run inside of a 2-foot length. So people who like to do N-gauge layouts, which are 4 foot by 2 foot, you could realistically get a first radius circle of track in a 4 foot by 2 foot layout as well. So the size difference between TT 120 and N-gauge 1 to 148 in the UK isn't too much of a problem, but it does have that slight benefit that the TT models are bigger and a little bit easier to handle. So yeah, I think it's probably time to draw some conclusions on this one. On the whole, I'm pretty happy with this first edition of the Hornby TT 120 range. I think that locomotive and the Pullman coaches are finished to a very high standard, and they look absolutely lovely running round on the track. The performance is a little bit more questionable, however, particularly with that rear pony truck and that front bogie sort of lifting up and pinging back into place as we previously looked at. The coaches, on the other hand, I can't fault them. They seem to run perfectly smoothly. I've had no issues with those, and they are very free rolling, and there was no buffer locking, so the couplings on that have worked really well. I think that this particular locomotive isn't really designed for a train set. I think it would work much better on large sweeping curves, like on a proper layout. So it will be interesting to see if the other train set, which is still on pre-order for me, and I'm looking at getting it soon, hopefully, will have these same issues that I've highlighted here. I think the controller was a little bit cheap and plasticky, but it does do the job. And the track is code 80, which means that it's not the finest of profile, and it did feel a little bit cheap. No cheaper than the normal Hornby 00 gauge track, but that adverse camber was a little bit of a concern, especially if you're running this as a train set on a tabletop. On a permanent layout, probably not too bad. So with that in mind, and I remember saying that in my previous video I actually got the 15% discount because I joined the TT club, so I didn't pay the full £215.99 for this. I spent closer to the range of £185. At the time I was quite disappointed that I didn't get everything that was included in the set because the power track was missing, but now that I've had it, it does seem okay. It is a bit high, I think, for what you're getting in the set, but given the very nice finish of the model, it could be justifiable. But personally, I would prefer it to be considerably cheaper, especially if we're trying to encourage new modelers into the hobby. I'm not quite sure that this train set is that train set. Perhaps a cheaper train set with a smaller locomotive and some tighter curves and some, I don't know, buildings to make it a little bit more fun would be a better way to go. At the time I'm making this video, there is another offering of this train set available to pre-order, and that one features sound. And as you can see, the price on that one is considerably higher. So again, it will be a personal choice as to whether you see the value in paying that much for this product. But what do you think of this product, and do you think it's worth the high price tag that it has associated with it? Do you agree with my assessment, and do you think my review was fair? Let me know down in the comments because I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, a quick shout out to my channel members and patrons for the extra support they give the channel. Massive thanks to these guys on screen. And if you'd like to join these guys, find out how you can get involved, take a look at the link in the description. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome my newest member, Tug Tug, who joins us as a channel member on YouTube. Welcome to the club. If you're new here and you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and dropping a like would be massively appreciated. I'd like to extend my thanks once again to Blinkist for sponsoring this video, and finally the last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time.